Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Smoller. I'm the Director of Educational Programs here with the Journey Through Hallowed Ground. And today we are continuing our virtual tour throughout different sites across the heritage area. And today we are joined by the Chief Interpretation and Education at Catoctin Mountain Park, Philip Greenwald. So Philip, thank you so much for being with us today, and we'd love to hear more about your park.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. And I was going to say welcome to a very spring day in Maryland, but I'm not quite sure the weather's cooperating. But as the theme says, if you wait 10 minutes, it'll change. So hopefully it gets warmer and more sunny. But it's a beautiful day here on the mountain. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As Katie said, my name is Philip Greenwald. I'm the Chief of Visitor Services. We call it Interpretation and Education here at Catoctin Mountain Park. We're a unique park because we are a national park unit, one of 421 sites spread throughout the United States and U.S. territories, but one of the only few that don't have the word national in our legislation. So we are just Catoctin Mountain Park, unlike ones also in the heritage area like Antietam National Battlefield, Monocacy National Battlefield. So we're a little unique. The park was created kind of as a test. We are a success story. So Catoctin comes around about 1935. It is a test to see whether land could be set aside that has a value as a cultural, natural, and a recreation, or what we refer to as a recreational designated area. And so they look at about 10,000 acres up here in the Catoctin Mountain range. The goal is to find something that is close to metropolitan areas. So we're a little over 50 some miles from Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, not too far, of course, from other ones like Philadelphia, about 3 hours or so. They also look for areas that had some type of usage that could provide access to recreation. So we have Owens Creek, Big Hunting Creek, where people can go fishing. There is obviously some wildlife at the time, so there are other activities of hiking, wildlife viewing, and so forth. Initially, on about January of 1936, the first facilities will be built here. We'll actually have 3 camps: Misty Mount, Camp Green Top, and then what is now known as Camp David today. So these will come into formation by the CCC, the WPA, part of the New Deal legislation. However, they also find out that Catoctin is a great area to actually train as the United States starts to build up toward World War II. Initially, the Maryland National Guard, and then later on, the predecessor to what is now the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. So here they will take over one of the camps, what is now Camp Green Top. Of course, the area will be closed off for visitation, and they'll start to train operatives for operations places in Southeast Asia, to deal with help with the Chinese fighting the Japanese, also for service behind Nazi lines in occupied Europe. In addition to having the OSS here, we actually had at one time a few hundred British sailors that had R&R here. Their ships were being repaired in Baltimore, and so they brought them up here to have a little rest and relaxation. The camp manager, the park superintendent at the time, said they were very well behaved. They actually left the camp a little better than they got it. So they were good guests, except about a month later when the park received the phone bill. Apparently they spent a lot of time calling their relatives and family back in England. And so the National Park Service had to talk to the War Department about who could pay or foot this giant phone bill. Today, of course, we can get a national calling or calling cards, but the British sailors want to let their family know they were okay on this side of the pond. What was neat here, as the OSS did train, they developed one of the most expensive buildings, would be equivalent to about a $6 million building today, and they refer to it as the House of Horrors. And the name, of course, sounds like something we'd see in October. You go around for Halloween, but it was supposed to simulate what it was like to be dropped off. Remember, these are operatives working behind the lines, doing espionage, recon, connecting with some of the resistance movements in Europe. And so the goal was to put them in this building where they would pump in sounds. They would maybe cut down the lighting, also have walls that would collapse or floors that would fall in, to mimic what it was like to go through a unstable situation and see how they would survive. And so this building obviously did not is not still standing here today. The National Park Service doesn't really need a building that floors just fall in on visitors. So we did use that building, recuperate it, and use it for something else. There's also other things, Camp Ritchie up the road. They would do training the bride operatives from there. They would kind of find their way back to the Catoctin area to see if they could make it behind a pseudo enemy lines. And so through World War II, this was used off limits to be trained to help the victory, the Allied victory in World War II. Afterwards, they will come back and decide what to do with the 10,000 acres. There'll be an agreement between the National Park Service, the Department of Interior, plus the state of Maryland to divide the 10,000 acres along Route 77. So if you come up today out of Thurmont, Maryland, you'll come up the road to the park. You'll notice on the left side, there'll be a sign for Maryland State Parks, Cunningham Falls State Park. And then about 50 yards up to your right will be a arrowhead sign that says Catoctin Mountain Park. So everything to your left, a little over 4,300 acres belongs to the state park. About 5,700 acres of the 10,000 is the national park north of the road. And so we work closely together for special events, for interpretive purposes, to connect. We even have one trail that will leave the visitor center, take you out safely across Route 77 to Cunningham Falls itself, bring you back, and then up to Hog Rock, which is one of the vistas. Unfortunately, it does not look like a hog or a pig. It gets its name because farmers would use that part of the hill to run some of their hogs up, let them loose, so they would fatten themselves up during certain times of the year. So Catoctin Mountain Park, after the war, will be established. They'll have more fully. They'll develop, of course, ability for people to come camp and lodge. Some of the same lodging at Misty Mount, which is available for rent through recreation.gov, is still reminiscent of that CCC era. Good getaway. We provide even the firewood. So if you need to get away from the bustling towns of Frederick or wherever else you're watching from, we're a short staycation away. There's also over 20 miles of trails right now that we're working on actually expanding. We just sent out a thing for public comment, and we came back with some great answers and replies. So we're trying to make some more accessible trails. We're trying to connect some of the trails and further down the road, setting us up for maybe connect even as far out to some of the like Appalachian Trail or so forth that'll connect Catoctin to a wider range. The park today, we are open 362 days a year at the visitor center. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's are the 3 days we're not. We just put in a whole new exhibit area right before the pandemic, so it's perfect timing. So if you're used to coming to Catoctin, I used to come up as a kid, and you see the taxidermied animals behind a glass thing that would kind of freak you out as a little kid because these animals are just there. That is completely gone. It is a little more interactive. We have a 1930s era radio that will play some nice tunes, or you can listen to the Fireside Chat by Franklin Roosevelt, and it takes you through the history of a few thousand years. There's evidence of peoples in this area about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, all the way up to what it is today, Catoctin Mountain Park as a place for recreation, renewal, and rehabilitation. Besides the visitor center there, of course, everyone wants to know the worst kept secret in Catoctin Mountain Park. That is Camp David. It is the presidential retreat here. It was introduced to the Franklin Roosevelt when he was looking for a place to have a getaway from Washington, D.C., but be in close proximity in case he needed to return. Secretary of the Interior at the time put forward to the National Park Service to see if there was a place. The Park Service director pointed him to Catoctin Mountain Park, or Catoctin Recreation Designated Area. Roosevelt liked that what was up here, so he named the camp originally Shangri-La. It was not until 2 presidents later, Dwight Eisenhower, who renamed it Camp David in honor of his grandson. And so we actually have a few histories on it. It is obviously off limits today for general visitation, unless you want to become president of the United States, and then that's your prerogative. But it is one of the neat features because from the president all the way down to individual visitors, this is a place of rest and recuperation, to hike, to get some amazing views. We have shorter trails that are accessible, like Spice Bush. We have great picnic areas, fishing. If you have a large group, we have even large rental areas where you can rent out a indoor basketball court, a full kitchen area, a dorm. So if you have a big rec event or group outing you want to do. We also have just a lot of various activities to get people out and about. We are looking this year to expand our programming as we move out of this pandemic era, from hikes to working with the local libraries for tyke hikes, for maybe blacksmith demonstrations, maybe some camp programs or music programs. So continue to check back at Catoctin Mountain Park's website, nps.gov/CATO, or reach out. If you send an email to the contact us, it'll come to me. So you know it'll be answered. I can't guarantee much, but I can guarantee that emails will be answered in that regard. Or stop by the visitor center. Besides just the exhibit area, we have rangers staffing it. We've got a small little bookstore, gift shop, a bunch of different trails, guides, and so forth. And so we're excited to be in the back coming out of this pandemic. Sorry, some popped up on the screen here, and I can't do two things at once, apparently. But yeah, Catoctin Mountain Park, about 5,700 acres. 1935 is when it's established. And today we preserve an area that is a success story, which is amazing. This is my 7th national park working, and each one has a different story. But not only did one come back as a rejuvenation, but it shows what can happen as an area can be used in many ways. It looks like it's been worn out, but actually can be replenished by just a little bit of foresight, a little bit of advanced thought, and a little bit of collaboration. I'll leave before the spiel, before taking questions, by using something that we found out from some of the first inhabitants here, the natives of the Potomac, of the Potomac River Shed. And they would come here to look for rhyolite, which would they use for their spear points or their arrowhead points. And so as they approached Catoctin, it became an area that everyone needed to use. And so they actually put aside some of their differences, put aside some of their longstanding feuds and disagreements, and they would all mine this rhyolite because they needed it for survival. So Catoctin Mountains became for lack of a better term, a timeout area. And then when you got off the mountain, obviously you went back to settling those feuds or raiding or pillaging or whatever else you did. So in this time and era, we invite people to come to Catoctin for that timeout from their cell phones or their busy lives, or just to come back to nature and see what happens when people have the advanced thought to say, you know what, we need areas just to relax and recreate and to visit nature. And so come join us up here on the mountain for a success story. We're looking forward to seeing you around the park.
Oh, Phil, that was wonderful. We do got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to bring in our intern, Ben Kellerhals, who's going to lead the Q&A for us.
Perfect.
Hey there. Great presentation. And yeah, I guess let's jump right into some questions, if you don't mind. Let's see. First, yeah, sort of a training specific one. Did the World War II Ritchie boys train in the park?
That I'll have to double check. I mean, we have Camp Ritchie, of course, up the road, which is not inside the confines of the park. We do know Maryland National Guard was here initially, and then they pushed out for the OSS. And so most of Catoctin Mountain Park was used primarily by the OSS and was off limits to many of the regular U.S. military units. And so I don't know the answer, but if I can get the person's contact, I will research it and get a definitive answer. So as they say in the Park Service, if you don't know the answer initially, research it. If you get asked twice, then it's your fault for not knowing the answer. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't know for sure, and I don't want to pass out false information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. What is the origin of the name of this park? And with that, they also ask, is Camp Misty Mount of Washington County Schools of the 60s and 70s still in use?
So the word Catoctin is actually does originate from a Native American word, and so it does mean, I forget the exact translation of it off the top of my head, but it means loosely, yeah, like a rocky area or so forth, and because of how the mountain range is formed, and so we've anglicized it by making the C-A-C or C-A-T-C-O-T-I-N. It was actually sometimes spelled with a K, so it does originate from some of the early Native American peoples. And then the second question is Camp Misty Mount School. Just double. We Camp Misty Mount of Washington County. So the camp is not in Washington County. We only have a few acres of the park that spreads over into Washington County, Maryland. Misty Mount is of course, a historic name that was used. The camp originally was formed to support what was called the Maryland League of Disabled Children, which was their goal was to get these children with physical disabilities a place to recreate. Well, then they decided they built Camp Misty Mountain on the side of a hill, and that's kind of not the best idea for when you have mobility challenges. And so they then decided to build a second camp, Camp Greentop, which sits on top of Catoctin Mountain, which is a little more level. And so Misty Mountain was just a name that was used because it is in the general area of Washington County, Frederick County, but it does not have an association with the school in Washington County.
Cool. And just to be sure, that questioner also had one last portion, which was, when does the Avery open for the season?
So the Avery is at Catoctin Nature Center, or in Cunningham State Park. So we don't have the Avery over here in the national park. So you would have to look at one of those two places. So reaching out to Mark Spurrier is the camp manager or the state park manager across the road. The national park doesn't have any aviaries because it goes against the mission statement of keeping it in its natural state. So the quickest way to find the answer would be to contact the state park.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's just keep rolling here. 10,000 acres is quite a lot of land. How does the park manage to take care of such a large area? And with that, how would you recommend someone spend a day at the park with all the different options?
So luckily today, the National Park may have to manage 5,770 acres of it because the state park manages the other 43. But in this perspective, I used to work at Everglades National Park, which was about 1.5 million acres. So it's a little easier to manage 5,700. And so luckily we have a bunch of skilled rangers. So we use the term park ranger, which is kind of like an umbrella term, but underneath that we have the rangers in my division, visitor services, that do the park interpretation, give the programs, give the information. We also have a very robust resource management staff. We have a biologist, a natural resource manager, and a cultural resource manager, along with a bunch of interns. And they make sure that things from compliance, like we're not building a road over an archaeological site, or that they're managing the deer population, or they're managing what's going on with different type of fungus or diseases that might hit some of the trees here, because all our trees have been replanted. This whole mountain was deforested for the charcoal, for the furnaces, and so forth. And so we have rangers do that. We also have rangers that work in facilities that make sure that when the roads are built, that they are cleared of snow, and that the new projects are constructed along whatever requirements and regulations. And so here we have about 25 full-time rangers that are working everything from law enforcement that'll keep you safe, to administration to make sure that the lights are paid and that the rangers are paid. And so that's how we manage it. And so it is a multi-division, multi-resource type operation. So if someone wants to spend the time here, we have basically two parks in one. We call it the east side and the west side. The east side has the visitor center. That's where we recommend you start first. We'll give you the trail maps. There's an introduction to Catoctin. And then depends on how much of the hill you want to hike. We have about an 8-mile loop that takes people most of one day to do. It'll take you to some amazing vistas, Thermont vistas, so you can see the town. You can also go to Chimney Rock and a Wolf Rock. One of the rock formations looks like the head of a wolf. Or you can head out to Cunningham Falls and then go up around Hog Rock. And so that's on the east side. On the west side, the trail is a little more level. The Browns Farm Loop, it will take you by some of the first homesteads here as well. We have great picnic areas in the park, so you can picnic up at Camp Green or Chestnut Picnic area, or across from the visitor center in the start of the Cunningham Falls Loop Trail. And so that's some options there. We have camping. We also have, if you're ready to say you're trying to challenge yourself and going to hike part of the Appalachian Trail or something big, and you want to see what it's like to hike to a primitive campground, we have 2 Adirondack shelters. That's 3 miles out. So you hike into them, and then you can spend the night there. You can reserve them and then hike back out the next day, or keep going onto the Catoctin Recreation Trail. And so it's a good way to test to see if you're ready to do that ultimate backpacking that some larger trails entail. So that's kind of the way to spend the park. So we also have a 4.7 mile drive with a few different stops along the way with shorter trails like the Blue Blazes Whiskey Trail. We do have one old recreated still because they did make illegal whiskey up here during Prohibition. A little profitable because during that era, whiskey went from I think $2 a gallon to $22 a gallon in some of the cities. So it's a quick way to make a lot of money if you don't get caught. We also have the charcoal trail, which shows how they used the wood line, the woods here to create those charcoal pits that eventually fed everything from George Washington's army with weaponry during the Revolution up to into the 1800s. And so different ways to spend. So we have itineraries. So if you have an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, or a weekend. And so depends on how much time you want to spend with us.
Yeah, and that's awesome. There's so many different things to do and so much time you can use to try it all out. Yeah, let's see. Someone asks, what happened to the taxidermy animals? And with that, maybe I'll include what has the process been like to update this whole
Sure.
site?
So some of the taxidermy animals are still in other parts of the visitor center. We also try to sneak a few into our park headquarters to see if the superintendent would notice if there was just some random animal in the corner. A few of them went into collections. So they are still either here on site or at a collections facility managed by the National Park Service, depending on if they had some type of historical integrity or connection. What is amazing is that the park, we are in the middle of actually not only just we finished the exhibit area, but we're also looking at what we call wayside interpretive signs and updating and redoing them. And so there's these multi-year projects. And so the exhibit area, we wanted, so I got here at the end, so I'll take the credit for it, but it was actually done by a lot of my predecessor and some of the rangers here that are excellent, Ranger Ron, Ranger Carey, Ranger Dorothy. And their goal is how do we showcase all the history of Catoctin, but also make it accessible, make it not just where you come in and read a panel, but touch styles, make it interesting for kids, use the historic structure that it is in. So some of the building does date back into the 1930s, 1940s timeframe. And so what you'll do is when you come in, you'll get a great view of Chimney Rock. So you want to take a picture of what that amazing view is. Every national park likes that aha moment, like where you come in and boom, it hits you. And then we wanted people to also have a blend of history and nature here. And so there's some, you can sit down, turn on that 1930s radio, which was very important to FDR's presidency, the fireside chats. We have a stone fireplace. And we also have right outside this area, a little wood burning stove. So in the fall and winter, when it's cold, you can see a little bit of smoke coming out of this log cabin. It kind of attracts people as well. It gives you that homely feel. And so we worked with, we're very lucky to be in close proximity to Harper's Ferry, which has the Harper's Ferry Center, which does a lot of the projects for the National Park Service. And so they were able to help us when we found a exhibit contractor. And so a lot of the work was able to done. If we had last minute questions, they're right down the road. And so that project is completed. And then we have 35 waysides in the park, 36, excuse me. And our goal in the next 2 years is to update and modernize some of them. And so our goal is to make it as accessible as possible. If you know nothing about hiking or Catoctin, you'll learn something. If you know a little bit, we'll improve it. If you're an expert, we'll reinforce what you already know.
Awesome. So much great information. Yeah, let's see. I think for time reasons, we'll get to our, and yeah, it looks like we got to all our questions anyhow. So we like to ask maybe what your experience has been like and what advice you have for other people that are interested in getting into park ranger work. And you mentioned that you've worked at other sites and maybe how those sites have differed.
Sure. So I tell my story about why I became a park ranger and historian. I started as a history buff as an intern at Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park in 2006, which seems like yesterday, but now I realize it's 16 years ago already. But actually, I grew up right down the road. I'm actually the fourth generation of my family to have some connection to Catoctin. And so when this job became open to apply, it was like a homecoming. My great grandfather was a carpenter that helped on the building of Shangri-La, the original. My grandfather would take my father and uncle out here. My father brought us out here, I think primarily to get us away from mom for the days because we were a little rambunctious, me and my sister and brother. But first national park I visited was actually one of the main sites, I think, in the journey through hallowed ground heritage area, and that's Antietam. My dad took me out there as a 3 or 4 year old, and if you remember the 90s, there was the cameras that sat on your shoulder. You put the little lens, and so somehow he got me. I was always a big kid. I'm 6'5" today. He got me on the shoulders, that lens, that video camera, and we filmed one of the demonstrations that was going on. I was so excited to show my mom. When we got home, we got the VHS tape. I know I'm dating myself there. We put it in the VCR. We made popcorn. And my dad did everything right, except he forgot to take the lens cap off. So he filmed the whole demonstration. And so I told people I needed to become a park ranger and a historian because I needed to tell people that it actually, you could see the other side. It wasn't fought, Civil War wasn't fought in the middle of the night. And so an advisor in college told me about an internship with the Park Service. I had an interest to get my doctorate because name's Phil, Dr. Phil sounded kind of cool. And he said, well, instead of going into education, why don't you try this public history? And took advantage of an internship, became a what we call a student appointment, and then worked my way up what we call through the ranks from a park ranger to a supervisory park ranger in Everglades National Park to actually served as a park manager at a small little site called the Soto National Memorial for a little bit, and then into a division chief role here at Catoctin. And so my Park Service has taken me as far south as the Everglades, as far north as Morristown in New Jersey. But I've met rangers that have worked at places like Gates of the Arctic to the Virgin Islands. And so you come across in training and so forth. The National Park Service, we just will hire a lot of seasonal rangers. That's how a lot of people get their start. You do bounce around a little bit that way. There is internship programs. If anyone is listening here that has somebody between the ages of 16 and 18, we are looking for a YCC, a Youth Conservation Corps intern. We just sent out announcements. You can contact the park and we can show you about the application, and that's a good way to get in. So there's a bunch of different internships, but it is, I'm not going to lie, it is tough to get that permanent ranger position initially, but it is doable. You have to have an appreciation, you have to have a ability to move a little bit. But luckily, being in this mid-Atlantic area, there's so many national parks. And so there is that opportunity. And we're so close to DC, which has a lot of different variety to give you and so forth. But if there is any questions or anything I can help, there was a ranger, she works at Fort Stanwix in Rome, New York. She told me about a program called this, which is now Pathways. And it helped me become a permanent park ranger because I was able to get a master's degree and get in full time. I asked her, can I take you out for a drink or buy you dinners as a thank you for letting me know about this program? And she said, no, just pay it forward. And so if I can pay it forward to anyone, feel free to reach out. It's my name is Philip Greenwald, Philip_Greenwald at nps.gov. Reach out through Katie, who has my email address. Stop by the park, ask for the tall ranger. I'm the tallest one here. Or whatever I can do to help. And I'll give you the best answers I can or forward you on to the people as well. So it is tough, but ask the question, communicate, and that's how every ranger finds out what the next cool project is to do. So.
Well, Phil, thank you so much. Your story is remarkable. So thank you so much for sharing and having those tips.
Pleasure.
And yes, I will pass on your information. And just thank you so much for sharing about, there's so much more that I didn't even realize about the park. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And looking forward to come out in person and seeing more of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you around the park. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to come spread the word about Catoctin.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you everyone at home for joining us. We'll be back here on next week again on Wednesday as we virtually visit with Harper's Ferry. So we'll be back here next week, Wednesday at noon. And thank you again so much. And everyone enjoy the rest of your day.